I know what bullet I'm going to use, what powder I'm going to use, what brass I'm going to use, primer, barrel length, all that. Before I even build a gun, before I even start buying parts for the gun. And I make it work because I've done this so many times that I know, like, it's going to work. I've never got to a point where I'm like, well, this powder doesn't work. I got to try a different powder. Like, you do this and you work this. I'm going to show you guys my whole process. And if you read between the lines and you watched my 22 Nosser series, you pretty much saw it. But it works. I've done this process, found sequential charge weights that hit in the same place, loaded up 5 of those, and shot a half-inch group at 200 yards. And then that load has shot, 6 or 7-inch groups at 1,000 yards with a 10-shot test and no seating depth changes. Like, it works. It's quick and dirty, and it's statistically irrelevant. But I've done it so many times that you guys are going to see. I mean, these things all shoot. I'm already done with the 28 Nosler. I did that process. It worked. The gun shoots incredibly small. So that's what we're going to do next. We are going to be out at the range. Hey guys, Tim with Little Crow Gunworks. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to talk about load development. Alright, time to get into the meat and potatoes here. But before I do that, there's a couple housekeeping things that I want to handle. So first of all, I want to say thank you again to our viewers and subscribers and all the people choosing to comment on the video series. The series is already taking off, and it's quickly become extremely popular. It's getting a lot of attention. So thank you to those of you that are watching, subscribing, contributing. I mentioned this in the comments, but for those of you that haven't heard me say it, those of you that are watching these long videos and committing a lot of your time to it and investing in it, this series is for you. I don't... the people that are coming on for 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and clicking off, I don't give a shit about them, or what they want, or what they care about, or what they want to see. Those of you that are investing in this, I'm investing in you. So I want to thank you again. And then a couple things about bullet selection. I know we beat this subject to death 10 times over, but we're still getting questions on it. So guys are asking about Barnes bullets and say Nosler E-tips or some of the federal copper bullets that they have, any one of the mainstream monolithic bullet manufacturers. They're all fine. I mean, they all make good bullets. It's just we like the CX because it has the highest BC per grain of bullet weight, which means for a given set of conditions, it's going to have the highest hit probability. All other factors equal. So that's why we like it. Not because it has some magical properties. It's just they are incredibly well designed, and you get as much BC as you can, but you still get the monolithic terminal performance. And then the last thing I noticed, I couldn't help but notice, about 6 days after I released that last terminal video, Hornady released a podcast of their own. I think it's number 122, called Monolithic Bullet Facts. Some of you have probably seen it already, and you know where I'm headed with this. But for those of you that haven't, I'm going to link it down in the description of this video. I'd suggest you put me on pause right now and go watch it. If you're not going to watch the whole thing, I would say watch the last 7 minutes. I think it's 50 minutes long. So if you fast forward to the 43-minute mark and watch it to the end, and then hit the back button, it'll bring you right back to me where you paused it, and you can continue on. So you guys go ahead and do that. I'll wait. All right. So now, I'm assuming you watched that last 7 minutes. Here's my microphone. I think most of you guys know who's around that table. If you don't, you've been living under a rock. Straight from the horse's mouth. They're all CX shooters. Every one of them. At this point, there is nothing else I can say to you about this subject. So, we are going to move on, and we're not coming back to it. Hooray! All right. Now, we're going to talk about the second most contentious topic in the hunting world. Well, am I comfortable saying second? I think so. I think third would be the barrel length debate, which we're going to cover that today too. Second, load development. Here we go. I think I'm going to title this one Teach a Man to Fish, because I've already told you guys I'm not giving you a chapter and verse on what these loads are. Now, there's a caveat to that. If you buy a rifle from us, I'll give you chapter and verse. Why? Because then you're getting a rifle that was made by us. We know how it was made. We know what reamer was made. It was made with. It was our reamer. You're using our brass, our bullets, the powder we recommend, the primers we recommend, our system, chapter and verse. You are doing everything we tell you. And that at that point, and only at that point, is the exact load data relevant to you. If you're not using our gun, our system, the charge weights don't mean shit. So I'm not going to give you charge weights unless you're on board. So that's that. Where do we start? I guess let's start with published load data. What is published load data? Well, you guys have seen these things before, right? Here's our Burger manual. Here's an old Hornady manual. Here's a Barnes manual, right? You guys have seen these things. And then all the data that's published online. What are these things? Well, they have, most of them have good information in the front of the book about how to assemble ammunition that will go bang. Not necessarily optimal ammunition for anything, but just something that when you put it together and pull the trigger, it's going to go bang. What else is in these things? Load data, right? Different load data is in these things, which is merely a reference for their testing. It is not an indisputable list of facts that apply to everyone, everywhere on the earth at all times. It's just a reference. That's all it is. Nothing more. And it will be treated as such. And should be treated as such. Because not everything in there applies to you. Now, why do they publish load data? Well, I think I'll fire up the screen recording here and get going. 3, 2, 1, and we're live. All right. Never mind that for a minute. So, what is this? This is a picture of a highway. The hell does that have to do with anything? Well, published load data is kind of like the yellow line on the edge of this shoulder and the white line on the edge of this shoulder. What they're trying to do is give you a ballpark area that you can conduct yourself without getting into too much trouble. But in reality, you have shoulder and ditch on both sides before you start getting into something that you're going to be really in trouble. Now, some of you, I'm guessing, have recently seen the video that Ultimate Reloader did, where he attempted to run a 308 up to 300 Win Mag velocities, which is not realistic, despite what they did in the video. It's not even close. I'm running my 300 Win Mag, I'm running a 210 grain bullet at 30-60, not 2800. So let's get in touch with reality. But I thought the video was interesting. It was reckless, like no two ways about it. Running a 308 up to over 100,000 psi without a blast shield, not a good idea. But anyway, what it taught us was that if we use good brass and a good rifle put together by a competent gunsmith, by all high quality parts, you can exceed the listed max and you're not going to blow yourself up. And that's probably the only thing you should take from that video. So when you see published load data, just know that it's, I'm not encouraging you to go past the published load data, but what I am telling you is that it's not, if you hit that max charge, it's not like if you go a tenth over, you're going to blow yourself up. That's not reality. And I'll show you some examples of that here shortly. So, and you guys are going to see me looking over. I got a bunch of notes here just because this video is so technical. If I don't have notes, there's a bunch of shit I'm going to forget. So, what else? Okay, so now we talked about our big manuals. There's something else you guys should be conscious of. So, I have another example here of manuals. Okay, this is the Hodgdon reloading manual, right? It usually has some articles about what's new in the industry and what they're working on and their new powders, and they'll do a showcase on them and blah blah. Well, in the back it has all their load data that's also available online. Well, if you go in this, and just as an example, I'll use the 7 Rem mag with 162 grain Hornady soft point boat tail, right? Well, in 2015, so this is the 2015. Where's the year on this sumbitch? Up here, 2015, right? In 2015, for that bullet, the highest velocity in the manual was with Retumbo. Who's surprised? Not me. You want speed? Retumbo. Add to cart. What had the second highest velocity? So the velocity in here, 162 grain bullet. This is at 3 and 290, the SAMI length, or close to it. With Retumbo, they had 2963 for the velocity. There's another powder in here, they had 2955, so only 8 feet a second behind Retumbo. What was that powder? Well, it was IMR 7977. Bullshit. I'm going to call that right now. That powder was a turd from day one. However, look what's on the cover. 7977. Do you think maybe they're trying to promote the shit? Next example, 2021, same manual. Here we go. 2021 edition. What's on the cover? 8133. Same bullet, same cartridge. Here we go. Retumbo is still at 2963. IMR 8133, which is a fantastic powder, by the way. Discontinued. Unfortunately. It's not discontinued at my house, but it's discontinued. 2963 Retumbo. 3069 with IMR 8133. Now, if you could get enough of it in there to do that, that would be reality. Because that powder will produce a little more velocity than Retumbo if you run them up to the same pressure. Not 100 feet a second. I'll call bullshit on that right now. But it'll be a little faster than Retumbo if you run them up to the same place. But now, 8133 is the fastest thing in town. Well, look what's on the cover. 8133. Shocked? I'm not. Next example. 2024. Here we go. Same shit. 2024. What's on the powder? Or what's on the cover? Ramshot Grand. Alright, you go to the same bullet. They got another turd in here. So, Retumbo, 2963 still. Ramshot Grand, 3094. And they got another one in here. Stayball HD, 3046. I'm calling bullshit on both. Under no circumstances have I ever seen any ball powder treated the same, run up to the same pressure, produce more velocity than Retumbo. Now, under very specific circumstances, like a very specific case or whatever, but in general, I'm telling you right now, there's no way at the same pressure you're getting more velocity with a ball powder. It ain't gonna happen. I don't care what powder it is. So this is the problem with published data, is these guys have a vested interest in themselves, in selling whatever it is they're trying to sell. Okay, now, they have the pressures listed in here. Do I believe them? No. They're trying to sell what they're trying to sell. So, now that we've got the published data crap out of the way, let's go to Gordon's and we'll start to look at scenarios and how published data can lead you astray and cannot put you on the right path. So we'll pull Gordon's up here and we'll pull up the, take me a second to get this the way I want it here, 7PRC published load data from Hornady. All right, so now we have Gordon's up. We simulated a 7PRC because the 7PRC isn't in here. Well, how did we do that, Tim? We took a 7 rem mag and we put the actual case volume, the actual water capacity that I measured from the brass we're using in here, and then we seeded, we're going to use 175 ELDX for all of our examples today because, like I said, I'm not giving away chapter and verse on the CX. And anything you see in this video, again, you're using at your own risk. So how did we mimic a 7PRC? Well, we added the water capacity. So we started with a 7 rem mag, corrected the water capacity, and then we took a 175 ELDX and we seeded it in the theoretical case the same amount that it is here. So we have a cartridge overall length of 3.265. And if you look at the length of that bullet, like if we look at our database here from Applied Ballistics, it's 1.575. Well, if you take 1.575 and you add it to the length of the brass, you get a number. Well, the difference between that number and the Hornady cartridge overall length is the effective seating depth. That's how much bullet is stuffed in the brass. So we go up here to seating depth. This video, you guys, you're probably going to watch it on a computer screen. I don't think your cell phone's going to cut it this time, but let me adjust this so Cody can put me in the lower right corner because we only need the 175 data. All right. So our seating depth is 0.590. That's the difference between the bullet plus the brass and the cartridge overall length listed here. That difference is 0.59. So that's how much bullet is in the case. So now we have the right amount of bullet in the case. We have the correct water capacity of the brass. We have effectively replicated the 7PRC. There's nothing more to it than that. So what are we going to do? Well, we have our 175 ELDX. We have a 24-inch barrel length, which is what they had on here for their test data. Get up to that. So test barrel, 24-inch, 1 1/8 twist, Hornady case, Federal 215. Hopefully I remember to talk about primers. Okay, now we're back. So what are we going to do? We're going to run through these max charge weights in Gordon's so you can see the variation. I already have Reloader 23 in here at the max charge of 61.2 grains, and Hornady's listed velocity is 2,900 feet a second or thereabouts, again with a 24-inch barrel. Well, according to Gordon's, that charge weight is going to give you 2,840 feet a second. So 60 feet a second under what the Hornady manual says. We haven't agreed upon what our max pressure is going to be. Let's say it's 65,000 psi. Let's say 65, right? Well, this load, according to Gordon's, is at 59,352. Again, 2,840 feet a second. The load ratio is 92.8%. That's basically the fill ratio of the case. Burnt propellant, 100%. Hey, there we go. We want all the powder to burn. Effective efficiency rate, 28.2%. You'll see that vary quite a bit depending on the powder you choose. But at the end of the day, we want all the powder to burn because that's going to give it the most consistency. If all the powder isn't burning, you see on here, the gas outflow velocity is usually 450 feet a second faster than the bullet velocity, which means that if all the powder isn't burning, then when that bullet exits the muzzle, it's getting shot blasted with kernels of powder on the ass end that are going 450 feet a second faster than the bullet. So it's basically getting shot blasted at 450 feet a second as it flies away from the muzzle. You going to tell me that's consistent? I don't think so. Plus, Hornady said this in their videos too, that like from shot to shot, even though all the components are the same, you'll get 4,000 or 5,000 PSI variance across shots. So for this shot, 100% of the powder is burning. Well, let's say it was 95%. Well, one shot it's 95, the next one it's 94, the next one it's 96, because if the pressure is different, the burn rate changes and a different amount of powder gets burned every time. So how many kernels of powder are blasting the ass end of the bullet is different from shot to shot. So if all the powder isn't burnt, like if we don't have 100% burnt propellant, don't even talk to me. We're not using that powder. So you're going to see some of that in here. All right, so we're 60 feet a second under the manual, and we're leaving almost 6,000 PSI on the table. And this is their max. Who's next? 4831. This program doesn't have 4831 shortcut, but it has 4831, and for all intents and purposes, it's the same thing. And the max charge, 63.9 grains. What do we get here? 60,505. So we're leaving 4,500 PSI on the table. Projected velocity is 2840 again. This says 2950. So it's predicting 110 feet a second under the manual. If you don't have a chronograph or a way to check this stuff, and you're thinking, oh, I got 2950. Well, you might really have 2840. Here's another problem, though. 95.8% load ratio. That's fine. You know, you're getting a nice full case. That's what we want. Look at the burnt propellant, 99.5. So it's not all burning. And what you'll notice with this program is that the higher you push the pressure, the faster the burn rate is. So if you start with a powder and it has X burn rate, well, that burn rate changes depending on how much pressure you're subjecting it to. So what you'll see is that when you're in the lower charge weights, like in the low 50,000 PSI, we'll just do it as an example here. Let's say 60 grains. That's too low. 61. Okay, so 61 grains is 51,953 PSI, and only 94.4% is burned. So you think, well, how is that possible? You have less powder in there and less of it burns? Yeah, that's how it works. That's counterintuitive, but that's how it works. The more you put in there and subject it to higher pressure, it actually burns faster and mimics a faster burn rate, and more of the powder burns. So you got this double-edged sword where some of these powders, they don't all burn until you're running the balls off them. And at lower charge weights, it's not all burning, and you're shot blasting the back end of the bullet. So right there, that tells you that H4831 isn't a great option for that cartridge unless you're leaning on it, which we're going to. So who's next? Reloader 22. Alliant. Reloader 22. There we go. And a max charge of 65 grains. I'm telling you, this video is going to be long, but too bad. We're going to do it thoroughly, or we're not going to do it at all. All right. 65 grains. Is that right? Yep. Okay. 64,311 PSI. Running right up there. Leaving 700 PSI on the table. Not a big deal. 2913 muzzle velocity. What does the book say? 2950. Pretty close. 37 feet a second. 96.4% load ratio. That's great. 100% burn propellant. That's what we want to see. So Reloader 22 I would call a viable option. 7828 super shortcut. And I think this one was closer to reality. Oh, that's underloaded by a lot. Alright, max pressure. So we're at the max charge. That's in the manual. And this is, I can tell you from experience, this is underloaded. Max pressure, 59,560 PSI. 2887 feet a second. 93.2% load ratio. It's getting a little low. Burnt propellant 99.4. Not good, but you're leaving over 5,500 psi on the table. As you get closer to max pressure, you're going to get 100% burn. Who's next? Vitavori N560. Where are you, darling? There we go. Max charge 66. Mercy. 64, 606 psi. Running right up there. 400 pounds shy, psi shy of our theoretical maximum. 2958 feet a second. What does this say? 3,000. So about 42 feet a second, 41 and a half feet a second shy. Load ratio 96.4. Burnt propellant 100%. Very viable option. Reloader 26. Oh God, here we go. The fabled Reloader 26. Wait, so before I do that, what are we at here? 2960 at 64.6. 2960. You guys can probably hear my daughter chirping in the background. She just got home with Grandma. Okay, Loader 26. What's our max charge? 67.1. 2996. All right, so our PSI is 65,302. So a little over our theoretical max. 2996 feet a second. Load ratio 94.1. Burnt propellant 100%. So Reloader 26 has a reputation online as some magical fairy dust that produces velocity that you can't get from anything else. And while it is a great powder and produces high velocity, it is not special. So if we tinker with this max load, whether we tinker with the Reloader 26 and bring it down to the same pressure as N560 or bring N560 up to the Reloader 26 pressure, it doesn't matter. So we'll just tinker with this and bring it down to 64,600, which is where N560 was. Well, that's pretty close. 64,626, close enough. Now our velocity is 2988 feet a second. And with N560, we were at 2960. So treated the same pressure, Reloader 26 produced a whopping 28 feet a second more than N560. You can have it. I mean, I don't care. You can't get it anyway. I mean, it's preposterously expensive and you can't get it, where N560 you can get easily and it's less money and it produces the same velocity for all intents and purposes. So you can have your 26. I'll stick with 560 or something else. You know, and in bigger cases too, like if you get into really big cases, there's better options too, like N570. There is nothing on this earth that I have seen that will produce velocity like N570. It's faster than 26. If you get in a big enough case where you can get enough of it in there to hit max pressure, it's going to give you more velocity than Reloader 26, period, the end, at the same pressure. So we're not going to go gaga over 26 in this series because it's overrated. All right, moving on. Who's next? Vitavori N165. So Reloader 26 is viable. If you have it, you know, go ahead and use it. But I'm not going to break my back trying to get my hands on it. N165. I can tell you right now, this is going to be viable. 66.7 grain max. Woo, spicy. 66,484 psi. 2891 feet a second. The book says 2950. So we're about 60 feet a second off. 100% load ratio, 100% burnt. That means it's going to be compressed. So you get that much powder in there and a piece of Peterson brass, you're going to be hearing some crunching when you seat it down to this 3 and 265. There's no way around it. It's going to be compressed. It all burns, which is good. But again, our velocity projection is 60 feet a second under the manual. Oh, who's next? H1000. I know this is kind of redundant, guys, but I'm just trying to make the point here that these manuals are not the be-all end-all. What's our max here? 67.1. Same as Reloader 26. Look at how underloaded that is. So their max projected, or the projection for this is 56,562 psi. It's pretty anemic. 2667 feet a second. What does the manual say? 2950. Almost 100 feet a second under what the manual says. Here's the other problem. 101.7% load ratio. So that's going to be pretty compressed. And burnt propellant, 97.4. So this is a 24-inch barrel. You know, as you get a longer barrel, that's going to get better. But those of you that are running like a 20 or a 22 little barrel and running H1000, it's not all burning. And you guys can't figure out why you're not getting the box velocity. Well, you're doing it wrong. All right, who's next? Reloader 25, they don't have in this program. Mag Pro, we're not going to talk about because the powder is irrelevant. IMR 7977, another irrelevant, discontinued turd. It was overrated from day one. What's our max? 68.5. Spicy, holy moly. So we're at 69,123, 4,000, over 4,000 psi over our theoretical max. 2909 feet a second, which is 40 feet a second under the listed manual. So this isn't producing the highest velocity, and it's the highest pressure of anything we ran through the program by a considerable amount. I think it's like, what, 3,000 psi over the Reloader 26, and it's 70 feet a second slower? Turd. And then load ratio 103.8. I think you'd have a heck of a time getting that much in the case. That would be just about full up to like the bottom of the neck. So the whole shoulder would be full, like right to the bottom of the neck. And then you still got to stuff a bullet in there and get the entire boat tail down into that powder. It's going to be pretty heavily compressed. Does burn 100%, theoretically, but not ideal. So you guys see, like, I see some value in these manuals, but they're not the be-all end-all. You know, I told you guys I've been doing this for 26 years, and I don't know how many guns I've reloaded for, but I can tell you right now, every gun in my possession, whether it's my gun or a company gun, all the loads I have developed for them, not one is using a published load anywhere, from a manual or from online or even from some jackass on a forum. You don't even know if he even owns a gun. Nothing I copied from a forum, nothing from anywhere. Just, this is how I look at things, this is how I analyze things, and I find a safe place to start, and I work up until I see what I don't like, and then I stop. So take these with a grain of salt, I guess is what I should say. Now, what do we want to talk about next? So we talked about how the manuals, load ratio, powder burn, velocity pressure. Reloader 26 is not magic. Let's talk about the short barrel craze while we're on the subject, and we have the program up here. So, a lot of guys are cropping their barrels down or building rifles with shorter barrels to accommodate suppressors, which is item number one. I don't understand. But that has consequences that you guys aren't realizing. And we're going to go into that, especially if you're kind of new to this and you're sucking up all these 5-minute videos and technology and trying to learn as much as you can, and your heart's in the right place, but you're, you know, remember Dunning-Kruger, you're working your way up Mount Stupid and you just don't know any better. You're setting yourself up for problems, whether you know it or not. So we'll go into the details here. So, like, we're still going to stay on the 175 ELDX. Let's use 4831. You go, okay, I was able to find Hodgdon 4831 shortcut. It has a good reputation. It is a fantastic precision powder, so it has a tendency to shoot really small. It's not a speed powder at all, but it likes to shoot small. So we'll put 4831 in here. We'll put it at our max charge, give you the benefit of the doubt, and assume that you were brave enough to go up to the book max. 63.9. And now, let's say you got a 20-inch barrel. 2699 feet a second. Yuck. We'll say 2700. And then on the other end of the spectrum, let's say you use an optimal powder and you have a longer barrel, which is what we're promoting. 26-inch barrel. And we go to, you know, because what a lot of guys like to say and what the drivel you hear online is, oh, well, you're only losing 25 feet per second per inch. So if you're going from 26 to 20, you're only losing 150 feet a second. Well, that's fun to talk about and that's cute and everything, but that's not reality. It's worse than that. And in this example, it's, let's see, let's go with N560, one of my babies. And go back up to our max charge, 66 grains. So even though we're leaving 400 feet a second on the table, you don't know that because you're just going by the manual, right? So you got a 26-inch barrel, you choose N560, you run it up to max, you're at 30-20. For those playing the home game, that's a difference of 320 feet a second. Well, why does that matter? Oh, here we go. Here comes Tim and his frickin' slides. Okay, we did some hit probability testing. On our 8x8 box with a 7 PRC, theoretical 7 PRC, and a 175 ELDX in our mountain conditions as previously discussed. I already told you we're going to be doing the 160 CX, but these things parallel, so whether it was a 160 or 175, the results are going to be very similar. We have our two scenarios. We have our 20-inch barrel 7 PRC with the wrong powder for the job. And then we have our 26-inch barreled 7 PRC with an optimal powder. Oh, and he's got multiple columns again. What a jackass. What do we have here? Okay, so remember this novice, some experience, proficient, expert. That's our 4 conditions from our original slide. Why did you close it, you dummy? This one. So remember our plus or minus 6 miles an hour, 4, 2, 1, that's the same as what's on this other one. Novice, some experience, proficient, expert. Look at how big of a difference that 320 feet a second makes. So again, we have 3/4 MOA rifles. Novice, you're at 35.8% with a 20-inch barrel in the wrong powder, 46.8% under the same conditions. So same level of experience, both 3/4 inch rifles, blah blah. Just at 320 feet a second, you're giving up 11% hit probability. Some experience, you see it's 58.8 to 70.5. That's even worse. 88.7 to 94.3. It's starting to come back where it's a little bit less important. Expert level 96.5 to 98.6. So what we see here is that if you're inexperienced, that speed helps you a lot. Where if you're going to actually take the time to get up to an expert level of proficiency, where whether it's proficient or expert, you're going to spend countless thousands of dollars on training and practice, shoot countless thousands of rounds, all the time invested, travel, blah blah, to be able to practice at long range to get to that point. So, but you don't start there. Like, you start down here. So I don't see why you wouldn't want every advantage you can get and take that added velocity. What are these other columns? Well, so we have our 3/4 inch rifle here, right? Well, on our 26-inch barrel, the second column, we go from a 3/4 inch rifle to a 1 MOA rifle. Now, we haven't spent enough time on this, but these 3/4 inch conditions, that's a pretty tall order. You know, a lot of people have brought up the Hornady or groups aren't big enough videos where they're shooting sample sizes of 20 or 30 shots to get their rifle precision. Oh, well, I think that may be a little overkill, especially for a hunting rifle. Point remains, you know, 3/4, that's a pretty tall order if you're talking 5 shots or more. So this is assuming that you can get to that point, right? These first 2 columns are 3/4. Well, the 26-inch, the second column, is a 1-inch rifle. And under all conditions except for, well, novice and some experience, you're better off with a 1-inch rifle that's going faster. When you get to the proficient level, it's the same. A 1-inch rifle going 30-20 is the same as a 3/4 inch rifle going 2700. And then you get up to expert level, which most people will never achieve. Then it's in the favor of, you know, you got everything dialed in. So then it's going to be in the favor of the rifle that shoots smaller. What's the next column? So 1 MOA, this next column is 1 1/4 MOA. So now you're still better off if you're a novice or have some experience and a rifle that shoots 1 1/4. You're better off with that, going faster at 30-20 than you are with a 3/4 inch rifle going 2700. First 2 levels. And the third level, it's 7% worse. So once you get up to that proficient expert level, you're better off with the gun that shoots smaller and slower. Last column, 1 1/4 MOA precision. Or no, not 1 1/4. That's the second one. So the second one is 1 1/4. 42.2%, 61%. Oh no, we already covered that. What's this last column? This is an 1.5 inch MOA rifle. So this is a rifle that shoots twice the size groups as this one going 2,700 feet a second. So with double the group size, if you're a new guy, you're better off going 320 feet a second faster than having a shorter barrel that shoots half as small. And up here, 55.7%. So you get to some experience level, you're almost just as well off having a 1.5 inch gun versus a 3/4 inch gun that's 320 feet a second slower. And then when you get up into the proficient and expert levels, the advantage goes to the gun that shoots smaller. And then this last column is, well, what if your 2,700 foot a second 20-inch 7 PRC shoots 1.5 inch? Yo. So we're assuming, okay, I got this little short barrel gun, it's going to drive tax. Well, what if it doesn't? Now look at these numbers, 31.3. Yeah, that's worse than anything over here, obviously, and it's going to be because this far right column is the same amount of precision, but the fact that you're going 320 feet a second faster, look at how much that benefits you with a gun that shoots, you know, bigger. It's still benefiting you 8.1% here, and what is that? That's about 8%. This one, 5%, just under, and this one, 2.7%. So no matter what the conditions are, you know, if you say equal precision for both rifles, going faster is going to increase your hit probability. And I should have done all 4 columns for both of these so you can really see the difference, but I think I made the point that, like, the internet would lead you to believe that velocity doesn't matter. And that's not reality. It matters. I mean, especially if you have ranging error, like these first 2 rows where you know, you got a ranging error for one reason or another, that speed really helps your hit probability because the trajectory is flatter. So the fact that you're wrong on the distance matters a lot less because your danger space and your angle of attack is a lot shallower. So what else do we want to talk about? So anyway, I guess to put a bow on that, we don't recommend short barrels. You're giving away too much. And I'm 6'4", you know, I'm a big bastard, and everything I have has a long barrel, and I hunt in the mountains, and most of my guns are 28 or 30-inch barrels plus a muzzle brake, you know, plus a 3-inch muzzle brake. So I'm carrying some giant thing strapped to the outside of my pack, and it's, you know, 2.5 feet above my head. I don't hook on anything. I mean, if you guys have hunted in the mountains, like if you're tiptoeing through the timber, that's one thing, but if you're tiptoeing through the timber, bring an 18 or 20-inch barrel. If you're planning on maybe having to take a 3, 4, 5, 600-yard shot, you're not in the woods anyway. So that length is irrelevant. And the sooner you realize that, the better off you're going to be. All right, what's next? What powder should I pick? Well, how about we get to that? Okay, so we can close this now. And we'll go into these. All right, so we have, this is the relative burn rate chart that I downloaded from Hornady. Has, what's the number here? 176 powders on it. I think it's pretty complete too. I didn't see many powders that aren't on here that are relevant to the, you know, to the US market, but so we got all these powders. What do we pick? It can be kind of intimidating, especially if you don't know what you're doing. Well, let's see if I can simplify it for you. So the stuff that's relevant for this series is basically this third column from number 117 Vitavori N540 down to, for this series it's not relevant, but let's say all the way down to the end. You know, these are all down here. This Reloader 33, Vitavori 24N41, H50 BMG, US 869. That's all like BMG stuff, which isn't relevant for this series. So we'll just worry about this top part of this third column, number 117 to number 170. So we only have to worry about that column. Well, that's still, what is that? 353 powders? That's a lot. How do we narrow that down? Well, let's get rid of any powder that's not relevant to this market. So let's say we'll get rid of all the Norma powders, because I've been reloading 26 years and I've never seen a Norma powder. I've never seen a jar of Norma powder in the flesh my whole life. So we'll eliminate those. What else can we eliminate? Ball powder. Here I go ruffling the feathers. We're going to eliminate all the ball powder. Why is that? Well, it's inferior. That's why. It's dirty as shit. You're never going to get the velocity out of it that you will out of an extruded powder, especially a double base extruded. And in my experience, the ball powder that I have used, you know, depending on what your comfort zone is with running up to max charges or even exceeding max charges, in my experience, ball powder doesn't shoot worth a shit until you stomp on it. Like, past the max, stomp on it. It'll shoot like complete garbage until you get up around that max, and then it'll come together. But even then, extruder powders that I've tested usually outshoot it, and they're faster, and they're not as dirty, and on and on. So I know they're coming out with some new powders, like, you know, that, like I mentioned, that Ramshot Grand and Ramshot LRT and Winchester Stayball HD. You know, that HD, if you look at that, that's down here. They got it between Retumbo and 8133, which means it's almost useless for absolutely everything. Same with 8133. Like, 8133 is useful for super overbore stuff and unicorns. Like, it's way too slow for anything we're testing. I mean, even the 28 Nosler, how overbore that cartridge is, 8133 is too slow. you're not going to get to max pressure until it's so compressed that you're going to, if you leave the ammo sit for any amount of time, that powder is going to push the bullet back out. So it's almost useless. And they got Stable HD down there for a burn rate. Like, that's almost useless to everyone. Ramshot LRT, same thing. That one's down there. I've used that in some overbore cartridges. Like I tried it in my 257 Weatherby. I have never seen such horrendous groups. Like that gun, I've told you about it in another video. That 257 Weatherby I've shot cell phone size groups at over 1,000 yards with that gun. At 100 yards, same bullet, same seating depth, same primer. I tested Ramshot LRT. It shot 6-inch groups at 100 yards with a gun that shoots in the .2s using N565. So I just don't use ball powder. Do yourself a favor, okay? Any ball powder I have, it's been relegated to forming brass, breaking in barrels, like basically garbage at this point. So we're going to eliminate all the ball powders. If the powder is discontinued, we're going to eliminate that. There's a bunch of powders on here that are discontinued, like the whole IMR Enduron line. There are some good powders in there. I never used 4955, but I heard great things about it. IMR 4451, same thing. Heard great things about that. Never got a chance to use it. 8133, I think I have like 7 pounds of it still. Great powder. Discontinued. Hopefully they bring it back at some point. I know the ELR guys are pissed because that was like their baby. Now you can't get it anymore. So when we groom this list, what does it look like? Oh, look at that. Presto changeo. Now, I think I zoomed it too much here. Yeah, I did. Now, we can get rid of these whole first 2 columns, like I said, and I crossed out everything that was a ball powder or is discontinued. I don't think I missed anything. So now we have what's viable, what our viable choices are. And then we'll go to this slide. Okay, so here's our viable powders. On the left here, these are the powders that were left on that chart. So now we've drastically reduced that number from 53 down to whatever this is. Let's groom it even further. Now Tim's going to make his cuts. I've already said in one of the other videos, we're not using any Alliant powders. Some of them are great, but now they're more expensive than even the Vivori, and you can't get them. So I don't care how good they are. It doesn't do me any good to do a bunch of testing and show it to the world on a powder that nobody can get. So you're out of here. Then there's a few strays in here, like Accurate 4350. That's a extruded powder, but you know, and then some of these other IMR powders, we're getting a haircut. The only IMR powder I'm keeping around is 7828. So we look at Tim's list here. Now we're down to 15 powders. So we took that, well, and I included H50 BMG, which was down on that other page. So we went from whatever that would be, almost 60 powders, down to 15. Giving this list a nice haircut, trying to make this easier for you guys. So, why is this list relevant? Well, in my experience, these are the best powders in that third column, in all ways. Potential group size, consistency from lot to lot, velocity you can achieve, extreme spread, and also versatility. So I shoot, some of you know I shoot a 223 Remington for prairie dogs. I have a 30-inch barrel, big heavy barrel, and I use Hornady 80 grain ELD M's, and I'm using M540 in there and getting those up to like 30, 60. So with this list, I'm going everywhere from a 223 Remington with a heavy bullet all the way to a 50 BMG and everything in between. You can load almost any cartridge in between there with these powders. Now, If it's a more of a straight wall type case, obviously that's not true, like, or something that resembles a straight wall, like let's say like a 458 Win Mag or something like that. That uses super fast powders because there's no shoulder on the case. But any type of bottleneck, type Magnum or higher performance case, well, I shouldn't even say that. Even like 243, I load from this list. 257 Weatherby, I load from this list. 6.5 284 Norma. What else? I'm not loading a 270 right now. All these 7mm from this list. 7.300 Winchester Magnum from this list. 7.300 Norma Improved, which is my elk cartridge, from this list. 30 caliber, 308 Winchester, N150 or N540. You're welcome. What else? 300 Win Mag. I'm using a Retumbo. 338 Lapua Magnum, N570 or Retumbo. Either one. You could load a 338 Win Mag from this list. You'd want to be around like N550, somewhere in there. You get up into the big stuff. 375 Shytac. You're going to be at the bottom of this list. 50 BMG, again. You got that covered too. So you're swatting almost everything with 15 powders. And if you never left this list for the rest of your life, you'd be a happy person. So now I've simplified that. Well, what's relevant for the cartridges that we're shooting? Well, here's another problem. I should go back to this. Here's another problem with published load data. Is what they give you is almost like too wide of a window. They give you like a whole bunch of powders that will go bang, but that's not a list of optimal powders. If we go back to this chart, the full chart here, so my 257 Weatherby, just to show you how much versatility there really is on this list. So 257 Weatherby, super overbore cartridge, right? Well, depending on bullet weight and what velocity you're trying to hit and different parameters, you can be all over on this chart. So I've loaded stuff as fast as IMR 4064, in the interest of science, number 106 on the burn rate chart, all the way down to 50 BMG. So from 173 to 106 in the same piece of brass. Now, does that mean everything in between there is optimal? Hell no. There's probably a small handful of powders on here that are optimal. So that's the problem with published load data, is they give you a whole list of powders. Well, there's really only 2 or 3 in there that are worth a damn for what you're trying to do. So going back to my list, here's what we're looking at for, well, I guess to finish up for you guys, what should you do? Okay, so you have your published load data here. Well, Tim, what do I do? How do I know what to do? This is kind of the problem, is that you have your list of powders here, and it's, okay, you have from Reloader 23 down to 79, 77, H1000. I think 23 was the fastest on there. 23, no, 4831 was. So we have from 4831 down to H1000 Reloader 26. Well, 4831 is number 146, and H1000 is 161, and you have everything in between there. Well, the problem is you have, okay, so you have number 161 to 146. Well, that depends on what bullet weight you're using and how long your barrel is. So if you look at what they offered you, your slowest burning stuff is Reloader 26 and H1000. Well, that's really only optimal for super heavy bullets in a really long barrel if you're stomping on it. If any of those things are not true, the barrel's shorter, you should go faster on the burn rate. Your bullet's lighter, you should go faster on the burn rate. You don't want to stomp on it, you should go faster on the burn rate. So, like, it's not a hard, fast, like, this is the powder. It depends on how long your barrel is, how heavy the bullet is, and how much you intend to lean on it. Because some of these powders, you're not going to get 100% burn until you're up around that 65,000 psi mark. Well, if you don't want to run it that hot, you're better off going with a faster burn rate that you don't have to stand on it to get 100% burn. And the only way you're going to know that is, one, to test and have a chronograph, but also to use this, get this Gordon reloading tool and learn how to use it. You know, it's free, so if you have a computer, you don't have an excuse. Go get it and figure it out. And you'll see, like, you can spend time in there playing back and forth and testing different powders, and it's not like gospel. It's not like you can take everything that you find in that program to the bank, but you'll see trends and you'll get an idea for how this stuff works. Like, and a lot of it's just experience. Like, I'm at the point now where you can give me any cartridge, bullet, and barrel length, and I can tell you the 3 best powders to use in it. Without a manual, without going on Gordon's, just ingrained knowledge of doing this so many times. I can tell you where the sweet spot is and what you're going to want to use. And that comes at a cost. I don't know how many tens of thousands of dollars I've spent doing this stuff, but it's earned knowledge, you know, and the only way you guys are going to figure it out is to do it, one, but use these tools. Get the program, get Gordon's, use these things to your advantage and get in there and figure it out. But what I said in general for the trends, you know, I'll go back to this full burn rate chart. You know, like I said, I can, with my 257 Weatherby, I've loaded from IMR 4064 all the way to H50 BMG. Well, the same could be said for any one of these other cartridges that we're doing in this series. Like, you could do the same thing with whatever, a 28 Nosler, or 7 Rem Mag, or 7 PRC. You could use any one of these powders, but the amount of powders that are optimal is a very, very short list. And if you're one of these, I want a short barrel and a big heavy 175 grain bullet, you're going to want to be faster than, you know, almost anything that's on Hornady's load data. You know, 23 and 22 would probably get you there to 100% burn. 560, I think, might. Probably not, though. So, like, most of these powders, you can't even use this load data, because this is for a 24-inch barrel. You went down to a 20. Now all these powders are too slow, or almost all of them. You know, so now you're in unknown territory. You got to try to use a powder that's a faster burn rate from this other chart and work your way down into no man's land, and now you're experimenting. And I mean, I'm comfortable doing that because I've been doing this for so long, and I have these programs and I can simulate it. But for you, it's like, oh, well, I'll just cut the barrel off so I can put my suppressor on. Well, you're digging yourself into a hole whether you know it or not. And, you know, I'm sorry I don't have a formula I can give you guys that says, okay, if this case capacity and this bullet weight and this barrel length, then X powder. You know, that doesn't exist. It's from experience. But what I can tell you is that in general, when you look at these powders that you find in published load data, like go up to the 160CX, that one I think was even worse. Yeah, for range, they had all the way from Power Pro 4000 MR to Stayball HD and Rotumbo. Mamma mia. Power Pro 4000 MR is up here. It's number 125. Rotumbo and HD are 165 and 166. So from 166 all the way to 125, you're going to tell me every powder in between there is optimal? When, you know, for what we're doing, I'm picking, like, look at the 280 Ackley, for example. N550 to N555. So this one I have marked for double duty. For the 280, you could also use it for these 7 Magnums. But let's say the 280 from N550 to 555. Well, look at how much space that takes up on the chart. 50 to 55. It's 129 to 144. A lot tighter window. Same thing with 7 Rem Mag. If we say we can go as far as 555 to 7828. Where's 555? 144 to 7820, 154. I mean, that's a lot tighter window. So, you know, what they have here for the CX You can tell me all these powders are optimal? No. I can tell you right now that Stable HD, you're not going to get enough in there to make that work. Rotumbo, you're probably not either. Again, both of these, unless you run the balls off them. Reloader 26, you might. 25, historically, I would say no, it's too bulky. H1000 has the same problem as Rotumbo. You can't get enough of it in there. You got to stomp on it. 79, 77's a turd. 78, 28, great choice. 22, great choice. 48, 31, great choice. Power Pro 4000 MR is too fast. Mag Pro, I guess that would work, but we're not using that because it's ball powder. And IMR 4831 is okay too. It's just, there's better choices, so that's why I don't talk about that one. But you see, like, I can just look at this list and tell you, no, 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 yes, 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 no, no, no. Like, and you guys, I wish I had something I could just hand you that you could do that, but you have to get in here and muck about, and you got to be willing to test some stuff. And if you don't want to waste a bunch of money on components that are going to be obsolete the minute you test them, get this program, get into it, figure out how to use it, and get it done. All right. So we went through, so talked about the 257, crop list, showed my list, loading manuals, what bookends are viable, not what is optimal, use Gordon's. Primers, I guess let's talk about that real quick, and then we'll go into our loads that are relevant for, well, the powders that are relevant for this series. Primers, here we go. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Why is that? Because it doesn't matter. The primer does not matter. I've tested them all. There is no, I know people lose their shit over federal gold medals and what, it's a primer, okay? I have not got any most of my testing in my life's been on magnums, okay? So I've used more of these primers than just about anything else. I have not got any better extreme spreads or anything, group size, anything better with a 215 gold medal than I have with a regular 215 or a CCI 250 or a Remington 9.5 Magnum or a Winchester large rifle Magnum. They all work. They're all good. They can all produce low ESs. They can all produce fine accuracy. They can all produce high velocity. You're welcome. Don't get lost over the primer. Find a primer that you can get either in your area or that you see consistently available online and buy enough to last a lifetime. You're welcome. You're done. And that's all I have to say about primers. I've tested them all. You guys, I don't care what your data is. You can't convince me otherwise. None of them are any better than the others. I've produced preposterous groups with all of those primers. You know, the big, whatever that is, the big five. The 9.5 Magnum, the Winchester large rifle Magnum, the CCI 250, the 215, and the 215 gold medal. They're all good. So just pick one, stick with it. Don't screw around. All right, let's get into the loads that or not the loads, but the powders that we're going to use. Okay, another slide here. What do we have? I'm going to populate this as we go through here. You see there's a bunch of blank spots. Our 280 Ackley, our measured water capacity, which is, I choose to use fired water capacity. Some people say measure a virgin case. Some people say measure it and then size it, or not measure it, but fire it and size it and then measure it. Some people say fire it and then measure it. It doesn't matter. Just be consistent. And when you're comparing things, compare them all the same way. Whatever number you put into Gordon's, you know, if you put a fired and then sized water capacity into Gordon's, you're going to kind of lowball a little bit, in my experience. Or if you put a fired case capacity in there, the velocity predictions it has are going to be a little bit closer. So what powders did we choose for these cartridges? The 280, because we're looking for what's optimal, and 100% burn, and high load ratio, and good velocity, and on and on, and a powder that is inherently precise, shoots small, is available, blah blah. We picked H4350, and 550, and 555. And I can tell you that I personally don't think there's going to be much difference between them as far as the peak velocity they produce. Just in my experience, 4350 is a fantastic powder. 550 is similar, very similar to 4350. And 555, it's a slower burn rate, so you think, okay, we're going to get more velocity. Well, that's not really a velocity powder. It's not known for that. It's known for precision, but not speed. If we could get enough 560 in there to get it all to burn at a 26-inch barrel length, that would produce more velocity, but we can't. We get to where it's super compressed, the load ratio is too high, and it doesn't all burn anyway in a 26-inch barrel. If we use like a 28, I think it all burned, according to Gordon's, but that was at max pressure, where if you get anywhere below max pressure, it's not all burning. So like that's too much of a, you're pigeonholing yourself into one teeny little corner, and I don't like doing that. So we stopped at N555 as far as going slower on the burn rate chart. 7 PRC and 7 Rem mag. Remember what we talked about with case capacity? That equals speed, the end. Here is our measured case capacity after both of these were fired. 7 PRC, 80.96 grains, 7 Rem mag, 85.04. So on paper, 7 Rem mag is going to be faster. Now, because we're not throating the 7 Rem mag out, it's going to be, that 160CX is going to be seated in the case a little farther than it is on the 7 PRC. So some of that case size advantage is going to be chewed up by bullet, but I don't think it's enough. I mean, I ran the numbers. I think it was still the effective combustion space, which is the remaining space after the bullet's stuffed in there, was still higher. So I think, it's going to be nominal, but I think we're going to get more velocity out of the 7 Rem mag. And they're using all the same powders, so everything's fair, and nobody gets their undies in a bunch. Hodgdon 4831 shortcut, that's our precision powder for these. N560 is kind of the sweet spot. That is a high velocity powder that can also shoot really small and isn't very temp sensitive in my experience. And then the old standby IMR 7828 super shortcut. That powder was basically invented for the 7 Rem mag by DuPont back in the early 60s, and not the shortcut version, but the regular 7820. I think they called it something else. They had a different canister number for it, but that's effectively what it was. And some people swear by that powder in this size cartridge. And in my experience, that powder always shoots small. It's a little more temp sensitive than some of the other ones, but as we showed with our extreme spread data, if you think about this, if you get your extreme spread under 50 because you're hand loading, but it has some temperature sensitivity, well, that's kind of like just moving it back up to that 50 foot a second extreme spread. And as we showed, that doesn't mean you're not going to hit stuff. It's not nearly as important as the internet would lead you to believe, as I showed. So that temperature sensitivity doesn't really scare me too much, especially if you go out and test it in different temperatures and you have velocity data from different temperatures. That's really not that important. So I got to take a second. And 7828, like I said, in my experience, that powder shoots really small and produces high velocity. Great accuracy powder, great speed powder, kind of best of both worlds. Doesn't have all the new fancy additives and whatever witch doctor juice they put on powders now, but I think we're going to see pretty good things out of that powder. And then the 28 Nosler, look at that case capacity. 99.84 grains, mercy. What is that? Almost 15 grains over the 7 Rem mag and almost 20 grains over the 7 PRC. Almost 30 over the Ackley. Holy moly. Thing's a pig. So that testing's already done, and what I used was H1000, Rotumbo, and N565. We go back to our burn rate chart. You see N565, H1000, and Rotumbo. This is where I have a little bit of issue with this burn rate chart, because in my experience, N565 is not faster than Reloader 26 or H1000 or Retumbo. And this 28 Nosler testing, where's my little deal? I have it down here. This is like fastest to slowest, you know, fastest burning to slowest burning. Why did I put this down here, even though on the burn rate chart it's faster than H1000 or Retumbo? Well, the way I look at this is they're all extruded powders. They're all double base. So they're made the same way. And when I hit what I call peak pressure, basically the pressure signs I was looking for, when I hit peak pressure with each of these three powders, I was at the highest charge weight with N565. And it produced the highest velocity when it gave me the same pressure sign. So if I got more velocity and I needed more to get there, it's slower. That's how it works. So, and then Retumbo and H1000 in this case, with the 28 Nosler and this bullet, they hit peak pressure at the same velocity within 6 feet a second. But I think Retumbo needed like another 0.6 of a grain or something like that. So H1000, in my opinion, is the fastest out of those three. We might have been able to get away with N570, but same deal. Like I said, we'd at 26-inch barrel length, I think we'd have to run the balls off it just to get it all to burn. And if we did that, it would produce more velocity than these other three by a substantial amount. And this is what I was talking about earlier, where like you can step down in burn rate provided you can get enough in there and actually get it all to burn, and then you'll get more velocity. But if you don't check all those boxes, it doesn't do you any good to just put a slower powder in there. You're not going to get anything. You're going to spend more money because your charge weight's going to be higher. But the juice isn't worth the squeeze unless you're leaning on it. So, so for each of these, we're going to do kind of a primitive powder ladder. You guys have seen, let me go through this here real quick. I already said all that. Okay, so what we're going to do is for each of these powders, we are going to load up a series of charge weights. And you guys, if you watch my 22 Nosler series, you know how I do this. This is, I'm going to call it my method because I've never seen anybody else do it. So you use Gordon's or a loading manual to figure out a safe charge weight to start at. And then for cases this size, I go up in 0.4 grain increments. So you pick a charge weight to start at, and then you load one shot at that charge weight, and then one shot at every 0.4, heavier and heavier and heavier and heavier, until you get up to either the book max or where you feel safe, or what Gordon's tells you is the ceiling based on the pressure you're looking for, or whatever you decide is your ceiling. You load in 0.4 increments till you get up to or a little past that number, knowing that when you get up to that charge weight, you may not be able to shoot them all. You may see a pressure sign somewhere that you're like, okay, I'm done. And then you have to take it home and pull it. Sorry, my wife's coming in and out, and she kept leaving the door open. So you bring more than you need. And the reason is most people aren't able to shoot in their backyard. So like if you're going to go to the range, it's easy to bring more than you know you're going to shoot. Like bring charge weights that are too high knowing you're not going to shoot them. And then bring them home and pull them apart rather than be conservative on the loading. And then you go there and you shoot all your charge weights and you work your way up and you shoot your top charge and you're like, well, shit, I could have went higher. Well, now you're sitting there at the range with all your stuff out. You already committed a whole bunch of time, and you're wishing for a higher charge weight that you didn't bring because you were afraid to load it. Well, it's not going to spontaneously explode just because you overload something and put it in a box. You know, you're going to be shooting your way up to this. So what I usually do is I bring a few charge weights hotter than I know I'm going to shoot, and then I watch for pressure signs and work my way up. So we have one shot at each charge weight. Why is that relevant? We already learned from the Hornady testing that you need to shoot 30 shots of a given combination before it means anything. Well, I'm looking for trends. I'm not looking for definitive anything. I'm looking for trends. I have found this method to be extremely effective at quickly finding a load that will suit almost anyone's needs. Is it the best load? Maybe, maybe not. You can spend the whole barrel life doing load development and not find the best load. So I'm not counting on that. I need something that checks the boxes I'm trying to check. So what I do is, let's say with H4350 or whatever, find a safe place, load one shot at my starting charge, load 0.4 higher, 0.8, 1.2, and so on and so on. And then when I get to the range, I pick one point of aim, and I shoot the first charge weight. And I usually put my spotting scope with my, what the hell is that thing called? Not Tacticam. Phone scope. Put my phone scope on it so I record the target so I can see where each bullet is hitting. Right? So I pick one point of aim, shoot my first charge weight at H4350, and then I shoot the second one there, and the third, and the fourth, and so on and so on. And I shoot them all at the same point of aim. And what I'm looking for is, what this test teaches you is a lot of things. By the time you're done with it, and you shot your 8 or 10 or however many charge weights at that same bullseye, you learned what your safe operating range is. You learned where your pressure ceiling is. You learned what velocity band that powder and bullet combination likes to operate in. What you also learned is you'll see sequential shots hit in the same place on the paper, despite the fact that they have a different amount of power in them. So that tells you like where that combination is happy, a general area of charge weight where that combination, at whatever seating depth you picked, and it doesn't matter what seating depth you pick. You can start at 5 off, 10 off, 20 off, 50 off, 100 off. It doesn't matter. You just pick one and go to the range, load, make sure they're all loaded the same length, measure to the ogive, not the tip, and then shoot them all at the same place. So you're going to learn like, okay, well, 6, 7, and 8, those three charge weights all hit in the same place. Well, that's probably where you want to test, so you're learning like where that combination is happy. And it's not all going to be in the same place. Like with 4350, the gun might be really happy at 2950 feet a second. Well, with N550, it might be 2990. With N555, it might be something else. There's no hard, fast rule for this. It doesn't do any good for you to say, oh, well, with this powder, with Reloader 26, I can get this bullet up to X velocity. Well, that's cute, but if it doesn't shoot there, who gives a shit? Like, if it doesn't shoot well at that velocity, what does that matter? That doesn't have anything to do with anything. It needs to shoot. So, and not all cartridge and bullet and powder combinations like to shoot at max pressure. I can tell you that from experience. What you'll see a lot of times with this test is if you did it right and you actually loaded up to max, where you're starting to see pressure signs on the brass, or maybe not quite firm bolt lift. I don't really like to see that, but pressure signs on the brass. And what you'll usually see in conjunction with that is, let's say you have 10 charge weights, and you shoot, and the first one goes here, and the second one, and third, and fourth, and then 5, 6, 7 are all together, and then 8 is really close. And then 9 kind of jumps away, and then 10's way the hell over here. Well, that's the gun telling you that you've reached the limit. If it starts throwing shots near the top of the charge weights, you're there. And if you don't see signs on the brass till, let's say, the 11th shot or something, but at 10 or 9, 10, and 11 it started spraying them, well, you're done. That's it. You go back down to where the thing was happy and it wasn't throwing shots. And you figure out, which charge weights in a row, which sequential charge weights in a row hit in the same place. Then you come back with 5 of those that are in the middle. Like if the middle charge weight is 55 grains of whatever powder. Well, if 54.6, 55, and 55.4 all shot well, you come back with 55 and bring, maybe 6 of those or 9 of those and shoot 2 3-shot groups or 3 3-shot groups or 2 5-shot groups or whatever your standards are. And you'll see if you have something viable. If you get a decently tight group, or you get 4 together with 1 off, then you're at the point where you can probably just tweak seating depth and you're there. and you'll be where you need to be. So this is a good way to, my method is a good way to explore a few different powders without getting overly committed, because you can do this with 10 charge weights of each powder, or 8, or whatever the number is, and you shoot that 10-shot test, and at the end of it, you have a 10-shot test for H4350, N550, and 555, and you look at the aggregate group size, and you go, okay, I went from 2850 feet a second to 3050, so I went across 200 feet a second and almost 4 grains of powder, and my aggregate group size is X. Well, whichever one shoots the smallest of those 3 for the ag, that's probably the powder you should pick. This isn't rocket science. Guys, don't overcomplicate this. I'm at the point now where before I even build a gun, I know what bullet I'm going to use, what powder I'm going to use, what brass I'm going to use, primer, barrel length, all that. Before I even build a gun, before I even start buying parts for the gun. And I make it work, because I've done this so many times that I know, it's going to work. I've never got to a point where I'm like, well, this powder doesn't work. I got to try a different powder. You do this and you work this. I'm going to show you guys my whole process. And if you read between the lines and you watched my 22 Nostr series, you pretty much saw it. But it works. I've done this process, found sequential charge weights that hit in the same place, loaded up 5 of those, and shot a 1/2-inch group at 200 yards. And then that load has shot, 6 or 7-inch groups at 1,000 yards with a 10-shot test and no seating depth changes. It works. It's quick and dirty, and it's statistically irrelevant. But I've done it so many times that you guys are going to see. These things all shoot. I'm already done with the 28 Nostr. I did that process. It worked. The gun shoots incredibly small. So that's what we're going to do next. We are going to be out at the range, banging away. Finally, I'm going to get you guys some guns in these videos. I know this was long. I have no idea how long it was, but I know it was long. So if you stuck it all the way out through the whole thing, thank you. I know I got a little bit more Western on this one than some of the other ones, but it's a contentious topic, and it's the topic of so many different arguments and fights and spats online, and I feel like people waste way too much time and resources on load development. Those resources are way better spent doing this abbreviated load development that I'm going to show you guys how to do, and then spend those resources, go out and pay someone like me or whoever for training, and go out and practice. Get out and do this stuff. That is worth way more than you trying to get from a 1 MOA gun to a 3/4 MOA gun or a 1/2 MOA gun, or try to get your extreme spread down. That shit doesn't matter. Not for what we're doing. Not for hunting. Not for the size targets we're talking. You're trying to shoot a beer can at 1,200 yards? Yeah, that stuff matters. Trust me. I've done that sort of stuff, and then it matters. But we're talking game animals. Get out and do it. That's worth way more than getting lost in the weeds on this stuff. So hopefully I answered most of the questions you had rattling around in your craniums. I just go into these things with what I think you guys want to know, and try to get to the point and get you guys as much information as quickly as I can without getting too lost in the weeds. But I know a complicated subject like this, there's always going to be stuff that, guys are wanting more. You didn't answer this and you didn't answer that. And just put it in the comments. You guys know I'm answering pretty much every one of those. It's getting to be a bit of a time suck to do it all, but I'm doing the best I can. So I think that's all I had for now. So you guys stay tuned. I'm gonna try to increase the cadence on these and get out and start shooting these ladder tests. I'll take you guys along for the ride on that and show you where the dust settles with each of these powders. Again, I'm not going to give you charge weights. I'll give you velocities, because I think that's important to know, so you guys can go, okay, well, he had a 26-inch barrel and he cried uncle at this velocity with this powder. So if you're out in your own testing and you get up around that velocity, you should probably think twice about what you're doing. So the velocity will be a good reference, because the charge weight doesn't matter unless you're using our identical rifle system components, etc. So again, thanks guys. I really appreciate you. Thanks for sticking it out, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks.